On the day I married General Pei in place of the young miss, who had threatened suicide to elope with her lover, suddenly appeared. She blocked the bridal sedan chair that was about to depart. Seeing her resolute expression, I knew instantly she had been reborn too. Seeing her change her mind, the Liu family matriarch's worried expression instantly transformed into delight. She helped Liu Yinzhu into the bridal sedan chair and earnestly advised, "What's so good about a useless poor scholar? That young general treats you like precious treasure. Marrying into the Pei family is surely your destined fate. With Lu Heng by your side, you'll never suffer any grievances in the Pei household." Liu Yinzhu responded hastily with a bashful smile. "Must I spend my entire life again as Liu Yinzhu's stepping stone? But I refuse." As the sedan curtain closed, I smiled too, casually pulling the vermilion gold phoenix hairpin from my bun. I suddenly stabbed it toward the back of her neck. The 10th hall of hell is where she truly belongs. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. Subscribe us to read wonderful stories every day. Now, the story begins. Today is the wedding day of the Liu family's young miss, and Madame Liu holds my hand with a beaming smile. While greeting congratulatory guests at the door, she threatens me in a voice barely audible. "A family like the Pei residence was never something you could aspire to. Don't think marrying into it will let you trample over us. You'll only ever be Yingzhu's shadow in this lifetime, living solely for her sake." Her incessant chatter was unbearably shrill. Hearing those familiar words in my ear, I clenched my fists. I didn't even notice my recently grown nails digging into my palms. Seeing me keep my head bowed, the mistress simply assumed I remained as docile as ever. She softened her tone. "Today is your wedding day, and even that mother of yours locked away in the backyard can bask in some reflected glory. I'll have someone release her from the woodshed later. Let her stretch her legs a bit." I chuckled lightly. "Then I thank you, madam. I am Lu Heng, a hereditary servant born into the Liu household. Since childhood, I was chosen by the madam to be Liu Yinzhu's personal maid. When she made mistakes, I bore the punishment. Her faults became my misfortunes. Later, Liu Yinzhu pursued the pure friendships described in storybooks, determined to marry Lord Liu's disciple against all advice. Because I bore a passing resemblance to her, I took her place in marrying into the general's household, while she abandoned her status to follow her lover far from home. Never did we imagine the scholar would prove faithless. After squeezing every last ounce of value from her, he insisted on demoting Liu Yinzhu from wife to concubine, choosing instead to marry his childhood sweetheart, and that infatuated young General Pei. Even when discovering his bride had been switched on their wedding night, he refused to compromise Liu Yinzhu's reputation. He swallowed this bitter pill in silence, maintaining a marriage in name only with me for 10 years. For 10 years, I remained the young mistress of the Pei household. Over these 10 years, Liu Yinzhu's emotions had been worn smooth, and later, during a dispute with the concubines in the mansion, she was pushed into a pond by the scholar's favorite concubine and drowned. Pei Yuheng, returning victorious from battle, was heartbroken and no longer wished to keep up the pretense of being husband and wife with me. One late night, drunk, he revealed the truth of what had happened back then. It turned out that the day before I had taken her place in marriage, to free me from Madame Liu's control, Mother chose to end her life by swallowing charcoal. This was something Pei Yuheng later discovered through secret investigations. To ensure my continued cooperation in covering up Liu Yinzhu's misdeeds for Madame Liu, he chose to remain silent. In all these years since Mother's death, I've been deceived by these people together, exploited for the last shred of value left in us, mother and daughter. Lu Heng, all these years I've truly wronged you. Now that Azhu has passed, you needn't play her role any longer. Go pursue your freedom." I nodded in agreement. Since there's debt, it must be repaid. Besides, Liu Yinzhu might feel lonely over there. I'm merely sending them both to reunite out of kindness. In life we couldn't be together, so in death we'll be a pair of mandarin ducks. So I swapped his wine with poisoned wine. I watched as he collapsed in agony, writhing until he drew his last breath. I blinked hard, forcing back the tears pooling in my eyes. Last night my mother had already passed away, yet this venomous woman dares to deceive me using my mother's memory. I surveyed the bustling scene around me, contemplating how to deal with these people. Just as I was about to enter the bridal sedan, a young lady dressed as a maid suddenly rushed out from the crowd. Young ladies of noble families seldom showed themselves in public during ordinary times. Even when going out, they would cover their faces with light veils, rarely revealing their true appearance. Thus, no one recognized that the person before them was actually the true young lady of the Liu household. At the sight of Madame Liu, Liu Yinzhu's tears began to stream down her face. She gazed at Madame Liu with an expression that seemed both agitated and ecstatic. I regret it. Madame Liu knew this wasn't the right place for conversation. She hastily pushed me into the bridal sedan before pulling Lu Yinju aside. This girl can't bear to part with her mistress. So you shall accompany the bridal procession today. The paused gongs and drums resumed their clamor. Madame Lu urged earnestly. I'd thought that good-for-nothing had bewitched you somehow. It's excellent that you've come to your senses. What good is a penniless scholar who's useless at everything? That young general treats you like a precious jewel. Marrying into the Pei family should be your rightful destiny. Lu Heng is the most loyal and capable, with her assistance. You won't suffer any grievances in the Pei household. Lu Yinju choked back tears. Daughter understands. He is naturally the best. In her past life, Pei Yuheng had secretly helped Lu Yinju on multiple occasions and had even warned that scholar to treat her well. Though these matters remained unknown to outsiders, she could vaguely guess after several occurrences. Looking at her bashful expression, I couldn't help but secretly scoff. Why, even after rebirth? Does her mind still dwell on such romantic notions? Having been married to Pei Yuheng for many years, though there was no marital affection between us, yet I still understood him somewhat. During those years when Pei Yuheng was away on campaigns, he kept quite a few amusing companions at the borderlands to relieve his boredom. Yet in the capital, I remained his only official wife. Whenever people praised him for his deep affection, he would always wave his hand dismissively, putting on an act of perfect marital harmony with me, just to earn himself a reputation for moral integrity and domestic stability. At that time, Lu Yinju was still alive and well. There was no talk of missing a departed soul. I pondered for a long time before arriving at the most improbable reason. Pei Yuheng didn't harbor unrequited love for Lu Yinju, he bore resentment toward her. Otherwise, why would he have someone intimidate that scholar Su Yin, provoking even greater discontent in him? Later, Su Yin went so far as to bring more people into his own backyard, leaving Lu Yinju unable to voice her suffering. In the end, it was Lu Yinju who suffered the most. Mother Lu glanced at me sitting in the corner. The two of you will return the outer robes later. Once the veil is on, no one will notice anything amiss. She still seemed uneasy. Another day, I'll have someone deliver your mother's letters to you. When there's a chance, I'll arrange for you to meet again. With these words, mother and daughter had no time for further conversation. They could only hurriedly lower the sedan chair's curtain. Lu Yinju continued staring blankly at the curtain in a daze. Turning my head, I caught sight of my sleeve's edge, and her expression twisted with what seemed like jealousy. Does this wedding dress fit you well? I gently brushed my fingers over the twin lotus embroidery on the sleeve. Miss seems to have forgotten, this dress was altered to my measurements by Madam after you broke off the engagement. Lu Yinju's face darkened noticeably. Do you think replacing my identity can turn a pheasant into a phoenix? Stop dreaming, now that I'm back. Forget about becoming the mistress of the Marquis's household. You were born to serve your betters. If you dare scheme again, watch your mother's life. I watched her slightly guilty expression. Miss, are you afraid now? Afraid to marry that heartless Su Yin again? That ungrateful wolf who allowed his concubine to kill you? Upon hearing this, Lu Yinju's eyes widened abruptly. How could you? Before the words could fully form, the voice abruptly ceased. I clamped my hand tightly over her mouth. With my other hand, I drove the golden phoenix hairpin deep into her throat. Lu Yinju's eyes widened in disbelief, emitting guttural, choking sounds. Save me, you can't be here. Outside the bridal sedan, the clamor of gongs and drums continued unabated. The faint sounds she made couldn't even be heard by the matron of honor following the wedding procession. I gently brushed away the tears on her face. That Pei Manor is no good place. I found you a better one instead. First, go apologize to my mother. As for all those who harmed us before, I'll send them down to keep you company one by one. The road to the underworld won't be too lonely for you. Watching her expression shift from shock to terror, then finally to pleading, my mood improved slightly. Carefully wiping away every speck of blood that had splattered on me. Fortunately, the wedding robe was red, so nothing was visible. Lu Yinju was right. Killing the bride of the Pei family in the middle of a bustling market was indeed not a wise move, but today's bride was me, rather than the little maid from the Lu family who planned to elope with her lover Su Yin amidst the chaos. The wedding procession halted midway. Suddenly, a clamor arose in the distance. The wedding matron outside the sedan chair abruptly cried out, "Someone help! Protect the bride." This year's severe drought has emboldened many mountain bandits. The Lu family's daughter married into nobility, leading outsiders to assume they'd poured half their fortune into the dowry, which explains why so many greedy eyes were fixed upon them. In truth, most of the dowry chests following behind me were empty. Yet this didn't stop us from appearing as fat prey ripe for plundering in the bandits' eyes. Soon, the wedding sedan was roughly set down with a jolt. The bearers scattered in all directions to save their own lives. In my panic, I decisively bolted out of the bridal sedan. I hastily removed the valuable jewelry from my body and tossed it aside. The bandits who had been blocking my path immediately scrambled to grab them, fearing others might snatch them first. As they scattered in different directions, they inadvertently cleared a path for me. By the time I reached the Pei residence, my hairpin had long come loose. Everyone who saw me in this state exchanged bewildered glances. Under their scrutinizing gazes, I walked step by step toward the front hall. Pei Yuheng sat motionless in the front hall, lost in thought with a sword in his hand. Had it been anyone else, they might not have guessed what was on his mind. But I knew all too well the hypocrisy of this man. News of the Lu family's bridal sedan being ambushed had already reached the Pei residence. He was simply afraid that Lu Yinju might have been violated by bandits, leaving him with lingering resentment. When he saw it was me who arrived, he suddenly rose from his chair, veins bulging on his forehead, gripping his sword tightly. I declared loudly before the crowd, the bride, Lu Yinju of the Lu family, encountered bandits on the road but was fortunate enough to escape under our ancestors' protection, arriving just in time before the auspicious hour. Husband, let us proceed with the wedding. That night, Pei Yuheng barged in reeking of alcohol, yet his expression cleared instantly upon entering the room. He dismissed all the maidservants from the bridal chamber with a sharp command, staring fixedly at me. His gaze seemed capable of boring holes through my very being. The Lu family truly has audacity beyond measure, daring to send a mere maidservant in their young mistress's stead. In my past life, I was terrified of being sent back by the Pei family, fearing it would implicate my mother, so I exerted all my efforts to please him. Now, there isn't a trace of timidity left in my heart. I walked up to him and spoke bluntly. Lu Yinju threatened her life today and disguised herself as a maid, intending to elope with Su Yin, Lord Lu's protégé, amidst the chaos. She was certain you wouldn't take your anger out on the Lu family, so she made me take her place in the wedding. There were 2 people in the bridal sedan today. One of them was Lu Yinju. When the bandits attacked and chaos erupted, she must have already fled far away with that scoundrel by now. Seeing Pei Yuheng's inquisitive expression, I continued, taking her place in marriage was not my wish. Young Master Pei may send me back to the Lu family. Pei Yuheng's face darkened. You saw with your own eyes that Lu Yinju left with that Su Yin. My expression remained unchanged. It happened suddenly. I was only concerned about not missing the auspicious hour and didn't notice the young lady's whereabouts. But she told me herself, the madam keeps a close eye on her. She could only follow me onto the bridal sedan and planned to slip away midway. These matters can be verified easily. And you'll see whether I'm lying or not. I spoke earnestly. Pei Yuheng suddenly laughed. Since she looks down on the Pei manor and would rather disguise herself as a maid to elope with Su Yin than marry me, then the person who died on Changle Street today shall be your Lu Manor's maid. From now on, you shall be Lu Manor's legitimate daughter, Lu Yinju. Hearing this, I let out a slight sigh of relief. From being ambushed halfway through the wedding procession to tonight's bridal chamber, there had been ample time for Pei Yuheng to investigate what had happened. Lu Yinju had played him for a fool like this. He must have been seething with anger by now. My very existence made it impossible for the Lu family to investigate or accuse anyone. They had no choice but to swallow this bitter pill in silence. With Pei Yuheng personally confirming my identity, now in this situation, who knows how Mother Lu will handle things tomorrow. Early the next morning, soon a maid came to deliver a message, saying Lord Lu and Lady Lu were making a scene in the front hall. Stepping out of the room, she happened to bump into Pei Yuheng emerging from the neighboring courtyard. Husband, I don't know what madness has possessed father and mother, but they're currently making a fuss claiming I was killed by mountain bandits. Please go talk some sense into them. Pei Yuheng smiled warmly and took my hand. Father-in-law, mother-in-law, isn't Yinju standing right here safe and sound? Now that you've seen her, you can rest assured. Father Lu stared at me in shock. His hand trembled as he pointed at me for a long moment. How dare you? With smiling eyes, I bowed respectfully to him. Father, what are you talking about? Your daughter has always been obedient and gentle. When have I ever gone against your wishes? I'm afraid I don't understand what you mean by that. Father Lu widened his eyes. What nonsense are you spouting? It must have been you who killed Yinju. My good son-in-law, you've been deceived by this woman. She is not my daughter, but a maidservant from my household. This vile creature with a viper's heart betrayed her master, even murdering my daughter on the wedding sedan. I shall take her away now. If I don't flay her alive today, I would be unworthy of Yinju's spirit in heaven. Pretending to be frightened, I hid behind Pei Yuheng. Save me, husband. Father must be possessed by evil spirits, to spout such nonsense in broad daylight. Lady Lu had been barely standing with her maid's support, yet upon hearing my words, she suddenly lunged at me. You wicked, unforgivable wench. How dare you use your fox spell sorcery here to seduce Inju's betrothed? Her face twisted in fury. I'll kill you right now to avenge my daughter. Her face was terrifyingly close. Taking advantage of Pei Yuheng blocking everyone's view, I secretly mustered strength and gave her a forceful shove. Ah, Mrs. Lu lost her balance and crashed into the rosewood chair in Pei Manor's front hall, smashing her head until blood flowed. The scene descended into chaos. I watched the maids and servants gathering to enjoy the spectacle. Since you refuse to acknowledge me as your daughter, and insist on claiming that a runaway maid is Lu Yinju, then today, in front of my husband, let us bear witness. Father and I shall test our blood kinship. If our blood blends, it will prove I am indeed a daughter of the Lu family. Dare you accept this? Pei Yuheng gave me a surprised glance. Father Lu, who had been clamoring moments ago, instantly fell silent. Perhaps, that won't be necessary. Pei Yuheng feigned anger and retorted. The Pei family married the legitimate daughter of Minister Lu yesterday. If the person before me is merely a maid from the Lu residence, does this mean your Lu family is making a mockery of me? I wonder how many heads Minister Lu possesses, that he dares to deceive the Marquis's household. Madame Lu broke free from her maidservant's grasp and opened her mouth to speak, only to be abruptly struck across the face by Minister Lu. Foolish woman, you insist on spouting nonsense about someone impersonating Yinju, making me accompany you in this ridiculous charade at the Marquis's residence for half a day. He quickly strode to my front, taking my hand to examine me carefully. Yet there's no disguise on your face. You're undoubtedly my daughter Yinju. Look how much these brows and eyes resemble mine. I sneered as I withdrew my hand. Does father still wish to conduct a blood test to verify, lest there be those who wag their tongues before you, casting doubt on my lineage? Old matron Liu behind Mother Lu paled visibly. She rushed out in panic, kowtowing repeatedly with loud thuds. Please calm your anger, young mistress. This lowly servant misjudged and mistook the maid killed by bandits for you, causing today's misunderstanding. This servant begs for punishment from the young mistress. I chuckled lightly. Very well, since you've asked to be punished, it would be difficult to maintain authority if I didn't discipline you now. Then she abruptly drew Pei Yuheng's sword from his side, piercing right through the kneeling Granny Liu. Her terrified expression hadn't even faded, before she toppled straight backward. Hitting the ground with a dull thud, the front hall fell deathly silent in an instant. Mother Lu clamped her hand tightly over her mouth, her body trembling like a sieve. I swept my gaze around the room before settling on her. From this day forward, should anyone else prove blind to reason, let this be their fate. The Lu couple withdrew their lawsuit from the magistrate's office that very night. Father Lu intended to let the mistake stand and acknowledge me as his daughter. After all, I was indeed his flesh and blood, but I reckoned Mother Lu would never let the matter rest. That very night, I stealthily returned to the Lu residence and happened to overhear Madame Lu conspiring with her confidant outside the door. That wretched woman stole Yinju's identity and is now living the high life, while my poor Yinju was abandoned by her own father before her body was even cold. Clenching her teeth with a vicious expression, she said, since that girl claims to be Yinju, let's spread the letters between our young lady and that scholar. Once her reputation is ruined, the Pei family will naturally deal with her. That scholar is also to blame for Yinju ending up like this. Might as well let the Pei family deal with him too. I watched the whole scene unfold with great relish from the rafters. Lu Yinju had already come of age last year. She was no spring chicken. If anyone claimed she was naive, it was her own mother who had helped Lu Yinju escape the arranged marriage. Lu Yinju came to such an end, and the chief culprit should be herself. Mother Lu blamed everyone, yet she never blamed Lu Yinju or herself as the mother. Truly unreasonable. The one speaking with Madame Lu was Nanny Zhao. She and Nanny Liu, whom I stabbed to death today, were both Madame Lu's personal maids who accompanied her marriage. The two shared a close relationship. In the past, relying on her seniority, she had caused no small amount of trouble for my mother and me, Nanny Zhao worriedly said, but that would also ruin the young lady's reputation. Moreover, if the young lady's reputation is ruined, it would reflect poorly on the master's upbringing and bring shame to the mistress. Madame Lu scoffed. What do I care about the Lu family's reputation or the master's honor? Death extinguishes a life like snuffing out a lamp. All I want is for that wretched woman to pay. If her own father can stand by and watch his daughter's murderer live so comfortably, why should I spare him any thought? Everything I do now is just dragging the entire Lu family down to hell with me. My pearl has suffered so much. They ought to share the burden. Nanny Zhao sighed deeply and finally relented. Since I know someone means me harm, rather than waiting to deal with the aftermath, I choose to eliminate the source of the threat directly. I quietly lifted a roof tile and blew in the prepared knockout drug. I watched as the two gradually went limp. By the time they realized something was wrong with their bodies, they couldn't make a sound. Mother Lu struggled weakly, inching her way toward the door. Creak. She finally crawled to the door, after pushing it open with all her might. The hopeful expression on her face turned to horror. I watched her face instantly pale. My mood improved immensely. Nice to see you again, madam. The fireplace crackled fiercely, yet both figures before me were dripping with cold sweat. I stared at the silver charcoal glowing red-hot in the flames. I couldn't begin to imagine how much it must have hurt when Mother was forced to swallow it whole. The two trembling figures had left a puddle beneath them. I wrinkled my nose in disgust. You once said when disciplining servants who couldn't control their bodily functions that only beasts lack such control. Has my lady decided to forsake humanity today and become livestock instead? It makes sense, you were worse than livestock to begin with. She had regained some strength by now and could speak softly. You're my nominal daughter now. Killing me would violate natural order. You can't. I pressed the red-hot charcoal close to her lips with iron tongs. Mother Lu immediately clenched her mouth shut. Lu Yinju said the same thing before she died, that I couldn't kill her. You mother and daughter really are quite amusing. Mother Lu's eyes widened when she heard news of her daughter. Before she could say another word, I abruptly shoved that piece of silver charcoal into her mouth. The stench of burning fat was nauseating. Soon, she stopped struggling and fell completely silent. Nanny Zhao trembled uncontrollably in terror. In the past, her methods of tormenting others far surpassed mine, yet now that it's her turn, she's been frightened out of her wits. I slowly walked up to stand before her. Nanny Zhao kept shaking her head. Don't. I drew the sleeve dagger from my sleeve and plunged it fiercely into her chest. In your next life, refrain from doing such wicked deeds, perhaps then you'll accumulate some virtue. I took all the adultery letters prepared by Madame Lu and found the matching jade pendants symbolizing their love affair from Lu Yinju's chamber. Finally, I carefully wiped the bloodstains from my body before stepping out of the room. As soon as I exited, I happened to run into Father Lu, who had just returned from his pleasure-seeking escapades. Seeing me dressed like this, he froze momentarily, then he put on his paternal airs. Why aren't you behaving properly as the young mistress of the Pei residence? What are you doing running back here in the dead of night? Dressing up like this, what kind of behavior is this? Remember this, you are now my daughter, our fates are bound together as father and child, don't engage in those crooked schemes anymore. Seeing me glare at him coldly, he cleared his throat. I wronged you and your mother in the past. Let's not bring it up again, all right? I pressed the knife hidden in my sleeve. You're right, as long as father understands, that's enough. I wouldn't want to lose both mother and father right after marriage, gaining myself a reputation for bringing misfortune to my family. Don't worry, I'll still save some face for you in front of others. But this is only temporary, I muttered silently in my heart. Old man Lu was so angry his beard practically stood on end. He raised his hand to strike me, seeing I wouldn't dodge. His hand froze stiffly midair. He rubbed his nose and, after a long pause, said awkwardly, such impudence. Do you really think I wouldn't dare hit you? And another thing, I've already said your mother's matter is settled, yet you still hold resentment toward me. After all, I am your father. I smiled and said, today we've had this heart-to-heart talk, and there are some things I can no longer keep from you. Father Lu looked surprised. What things? All these years you've been constantly chasing after women, and there are plenty of concubines in the mansion. Then do you know why you only have two daughters, me and Lu Yinju? Watching his expression grow increasingly grim. That's because ever since the one in the backyard couldn't conceive anymore, she secretly gave you medicine to make you sterile. You're truly foolish, my dear father. Father Lu's temples throbbed with bulging veins. He stormed angrily toward the backyard. As I stepped away from the Lu residence beneath the night sky, he happened to hear Father Lu's panicked cry. Just as I expected, Father Lu had indeed suppressed the events of the previous night. He reported to the authorities, claiming that bandits had infiltrated the Lu residence the night before to steal valuables. By unfortunate coincidence, Madame Lu encountered them and was killed to silence her, in the imperial capital beneath the sun of heaven's feet. Such vile deeds repeatedly occur in this prosperous land. The emperor appointed Pei Yuheng to eradicate the mountain bandits within 3 months and calm the terrified hearts of the people. Pei Yuheng departed without informing me. In our past life, we were married for 10 years. But in his eyes, I'm merely an object to save face. Watching Pei Yuheng mount his horse in armor, I touched my belly and pondered silently. 3 months, that's more than enough time. Back in the courtyard, Axing whispered in my ear, Madam, everything is ready. Pei's mother passed away early, and his father died in battle. Thus, the entire Pei household now answers to me. I brought the person to the rear courtyard. 3 months later, Pei Yujing's deputy general sent news of victory. The mountain bandits were said to have been completely eradicated, but after leaving the capital, the general departed midway and cannot return to his residence for now. Pei Yuheng inherited his father's noble title but truly lacks significant capability. In warfare, he also relies entirely on the forces left to him by his father. This time he left, most likely he's gone seeking comfort in the arms of some beauty again. Such a man, unworthy of his position, must have long been resented in the military. Promoting capable individuals, that's the right path. The mountain bandits have been wiped out, that's good news. I patted my belly. I've got good news here too. My monthly courses have been delayed for quite some time. Last night, the physician took my pulse. It's been 2 months. Counting the days, it coincides precisely with Pei Yuheng's departure from the capital. Your husband is enjoying himself abroad, forgetting his home and unwilling to return. Send him a message. I curled my lips into a smile. Tell him he's about to become a father. We have been married all this time yet never consummated our union. No doubt when he learns of this news, he'll come galloping back post-haste. Aishing accepted the order and was about to leave, but I called her back. Remember to spread this far and wide. Within 3 days, while I was embroidering a tiger head cap for the child at night, Pei Yuheng had already galloped back on horseback. His face was covered with stubble, dark circles shadowing beneath his eyes. His clothes were crumpled and disheveled, bearing no resemblance to the refined nobleman from the capital. It was clear at a glance that he had rushed back urgently upon hearing the news, without stopping to rest along the way. You bitch! He strode over and tightly gripped my neck, his eyes blazing with fury. How dare you betray me? We've never consummated our marriage. Where did this child come from? Speak. Who is the adulterer? Pei Yuheng possesses martial skills. Without resorting to some tricks, I would never have succeeded against him. Now, consumed by rage, he hasn't noticed the abnormality in his body at all. If you tell me who that person is, I might grant you a quick death. Otherwise, I'll make you experience every method the army uses on traitors, one by one. The incense burner beside me was slowly emitting white smoke. By now the poison had taken effect, and the hands gripping my throat were gradually losing their strength. Under Pei Yuheng's astonished gaze, I smiled while prying his fingers open one by one. Why the hurry, my lord? The more agitated you become, the faster the poison takes effect. You ought to rein in that temper of yours. Even in the underworld, you can't afford to be this reckless. Pei Yuheng had already collapsed to the ground, gasping weakly. The antidote. Give it to me. I reached into my sleeve. Pei Yuheng stared intently at my movement, his eyes filled with longing. Then I pulled out a sleeve dagger, then it pierced straight through his palm. Pei Yuheng's face contorted in pain as beads of sweat rolled down profusely. This hand harmed me, so now it must be forfeited. I pulled out the sleeve dagger. The second slash severed his windpipe. Watching the agony in his eyes, my lord committed a grave taboo. You talk too much. If you hadn't been greedy just now, trying to pry out where the child's father is from me, you wouldn't have been poisoned. You wanted to know where he is, didn't you? Walk faster. Perhaps you can keep him company on the road to the Yellow Springs. The person on the ground gradually fell silent. I toyed with the sleeve dagger in my hand. The knife Su Yin gave to Lu Yinju was truly excellent. Ah Xing, return this to Su Yin, dressed in mourning clothes. I fainted from weeping multiple times before the funeral altar. Pei Yuheng's lieutenants came one after another to offer their condolences. Madam, you're still with child, you mustn't grieve so intensely. Indeed, the entire hope of the Pei household now rests solely upon you. Yet what hatred could that villain have borne against the general to commit such a heinous act? Madam, did you get a clear look at who that villain was? I knelt on the ground, refusing to rise no matter what. I am guilty. It was my poor judgment that led to my husband's tragic death. As these words fell, complete silence enveloped the hall. Aishing dragged out Su Yin from the inner room, bound tightly with ropes. I steadied myself against the maid's arm as I stood, trembling fingers pointing at the person before me. This is the man who murdered my husband. I had slipped him a drug that induces madness beforehand. Su Yin's eyes burned crimson with desperation, veins bulging at his temples as he crawled toward me with a grotesque snarl, but with his mouth gagged, he could only emit muffled sobs. To bystanders, it merely appeared he was overly agitated, further confirming their suspicions about him. Gentlemen, the truth is, I am not Lu Yinju. The crowd had already grown extremely restless. The real Lu Yinju planned to elope on her wedding day, but accidentally died at the hands of mountain bandits, and he was Lu Yinju's secret lover. At this point, I couldn't help but shed tears. This man mistakenly believed that my husband had killed Lu Yinju after discovering her infidelity, but in truth, my husband has the kindest heart, though he knew Lu Yinju was unfaithful. He still couldn't let her go, someone in the crowd questioned. How could a general remain attached to such a fickle woman? I weakly pressed a hand to my forehead. I am the proof that he couldn't forget Lu Yinju, because Lu Yinju and I are truly biological sisters. Everyone in the Lu residence can testify to our identities. It's just that on the wedding day, Yinju insisted on fleeing the marriage. Father couldn't bear to let the Pei family lose face completely. So he resorted to the desperate measure of having me substitute as the bride. With our 50% resemblance in appearance, my husband would even call me Yinju at night. These words were unbearably humiliating. After speaking them, I nearly collapsed into Axing's arms. The person who had just asked the question also slightly turned their head away and fell silent. Seeing that I was unwell, someone in the crowd said worriedly, "Madam, you must take care of yourself." I nodded with difficulty. Those with short tempers couldn't restrain themselves and stepped forward to viciously kick Su Yin, who lay on the ground. Su Yin, currently overwhelmed by the drug's effects, frantically headbutted his assailant. The scene descended into chaos as I cleared my throat. Yesterday the gatekeeper reported someone claiming to have old news about Lu Yinju, so my husband permitted his entry. My lord thought a frail scholar was harmless. But who could have guessed he'd be carrying knockout drugs? That's how he got the better of us. And then, after saying that, I choked back sobs. With a wave of my hand, Axing circulated the letters documenting Su Yin's affair with Lu Yinju to everyone present. Soon, curses against the two of them spread through the crowd. Aixing held up that sleeve dagger. This blade was crafted by Su Yin. He gifted it to Lu Yinju earlier. Last night, he used this very dagger to murder the general. By the time we heard the mistress's cries for help, it was already too late. A servant arrived with a blacksmith in tow. This man did indeed commission a blade from me several months ago, claiming it was meant for a beloved woman. So I forged him a sleeve dagger, light and compact, perfectly suited for a lady's hand. Ushing handed the knife to the blacksmith. He examined it carefully. This is undoubtedly my work. An old woman stepped forward from the crowd. I was Su Yin's neighbor. These past days I often saw him going to the tavern to buy wine. He always staggers out drunk. At night you can still hear him shouting inside, making such a racket no one can sleep. Yesterday, I happened to see him storm out angrily. I greeted him, but he completely ignored me. Su Yin's neighbor was the witness, and the dagger in his hand was the physical evidence. Murder for love's sake is the motive and reason. The guards at the Pei residence's gate witnessed him entering the manor last night, and all the servants around the courtyard have already been dismissed by me. If it wasn't Su Yin who harmed Pei Yuheng, could it possibly be me, a woman heavy with child? I didn't look back at the scene that followed, supported by Axing. I left utterly exhausted. As I walked out of the front hall, the corners of my lips gradually curved upward. Lu Yinju treats Su Yin like a treasure. But who would know that when no one's around, he often gets handsy with me. Not daring to touch Lu Yinju, he turned his attention to me instead. He was betting that I wouldn't dare tell Lu Yinju the truth. Behind me came Su Yin's muffled groan of pain. These military men possess great strength. Su Yin, on the other hand, is but a frail scholar. It would be quite normal if he were accidentally beaten to death. 7 months later, I gave birth without complications. His Majesty decreed that the child would inherit the title after coming of age. On the day of the child's full-month celebration, Father Lu beamed with pride as he accepted everyone's flattery. After the crowd dispersed, he sprawled casually in his chair. What an unexpected stroke of luck. Lu Heng, how come I never realized before what remarkable talents you possess? Just like her father, a mighty tiger doesn't sire a feeble cub. He casually picked up a teacup and took a sip. Pa. I'm your mistress's own father, the future general's maternal grandfather, and this is the swill you serve me. My little maid servant trembled beside me, repeatedly begging forgiveness. I ordered everyone to leave. She doesn't know the rules. Let your daughter serve you. Father Lu nodded approvingly. Now that you've become a mother, you've grown steady, understanding how hard it is to be a parent. I lifted the boiling kettle and walked toward him. Father. Father Lu looked up as I tilted the water pot in my hand. The scalding water poured entirely over his head and face. Ah, he writhed in pain on the ground, yet dared not touch his scorched skin directly with his hands. You're the only one left. I walked up to him. The wooden stick in my hand struck his knee. You allowed the Qins to bully and oppress me, making me serve Lu Yinju as a maid for 15 years. Now you want to play the fatherly role and reap all the benefits. Such shamelessness. This is your second crime. The wooden stick in my hand struck his thigh. You allowed the Qin family to drive my mother to her death, concealed the truth from me, and now expect me to devote my entire life to your Lu family. This is your third crime. The wooden stick in my hand struck his groin. The writhing figure on the ground let out an even more piercing scream. Spare me. I was wrong. I threw the stick to the ground, turned and drew the longsword beside me. Plunged it fiercely into his gut. The piercing screams finally ceased. That very night, a stranger appeared in the beggar's den west of the city. The valuable items on his person were swarmed upon and snatched away in an instant. As for his wounds, no one could tell whether they were freshly inflicted or had been there all along. Many years later, I brought Chang'e to kowtow before Mother's grave. 2 kneeling bronze statues stood before her tomb. Mother, I've sent down all those who once harmed us, mother and child. As for Mr. and Mrs. Liu, let them remain here forever, making amends to you. After finishing the incense offering, I took Chang'e and began walking back. The road ahead stretched smooth and unobstructed. And so the first story ends. What do you all think? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed it, please give this video a like. Now, here's the second story. My daughter was a dullard who couldn't wield brush or ink. After I was poisoned by the concubine, she was given to the crown prince as a secondary consort to pave the way for her half-brother. She began mastering the 4 books, excelling in the 6 arts, and became skilled in strategy, transforming into the very image I had once hoped for. At an Eastern Palace banquet, her supple sword danced with unstoppable force, piercing through the concubine's wine cup and shearing off her hair. Her hairpins scattered in fright, her face turned deathly pale. She smiled brightly, coquettishly leaning toward the crown prince. Your Highness, my stepmother is such a coward, no fun at all. After my husband and his concubine conspired to kill me, my usually domineering and unruly daughter became uncharacteristically quiet for the first time. When faced with her father cancelling her well-matched engagement and sending her to the crown prince as a concubine, she simply obeyed and said yes. Concubine Su smiled contentedly and sneered at her son. I thought she had quite the temper, but it turns out she knows what's best. Only those who know what's best are easy to control. And so, my daughter Sui Sui was sent to the Eastern Palace in a modest sedan chair. Her father said, "Your mother has just passed away. It's not appropriate to hold lavish ceremonies." He promoted concubine Su to the status of principal wife and registered the illegitimate son as legitimate, all of which I had anticipated. But what I never expected was that he would take the dowry I had set aside for Sui Sui and use it as betrothal gifts for the illegitimate eldest son's marriage. Family members should support each other. As a mere concubine of the crown prince, you don't need to manage household affairs or spend money on social connections. Your brother's marriage is a significant matter. Don't be as petty and unreasonable as your mother was. Sui Sui replied with a smile. Of course not. Brother is my own flesh and blood. Whatever little sister has, brother is welcome to take. My Sui Sui is exceptionally beautiful, the foremost beauty in the capital. These words were not praise, but humiliation. They called her a wooden beauty, saying her belly was full of weeds. In the capital, women's literary talents are highly valued. And I've often been mocked because of Sui Sui. Whenever I returned home frustrated after being ridiculed outside and vented my anger at her, she would always respond with playful banter. What's there to learn? Mother, look at my swordsmanship. Even master praised me again. She kept chattering away, coaxing me relentlessly until I couldn't muster even a hint of irritation. The next second, the teacher came knocking at the door. Your daughter. Your daughter tore up the 4 books to wrap sweet potatoes, chopped up the zither for firewood, and even took my finest brush pens to skewer mutton kebabs. I was so angry I could spit blood, but she had vanished without a trace. Recalling the past, my heart aches as if pierced by knives. The crown prince favors talented women, yet I scarcely recognize a few characters. How could I ever win his affection? On the wedding night, the crown prince never came. Sui Sui waited for a while, then simply lifted her own bridal veil and went to sleep. The Eastern Palace housed countless concubines, many of whom were beauties like Sui Sui, sent to curry favor with the crown prince. On the Mid-Autumn Festival a month later, the Eastern Palace hosted a banquet where guests played the floating wine cup along the winding stream poetry game, yet Sui Sui remained utterly clueless throughout. Li Liangyuan, who had always looked down on Sui Sui, sneered, good for nothing. The crown prince said unhappily, since you've married into the Eastern Palace, you represent the dignity of the imperial family. Sui Sui knelt on the ground pleading for forgiveness. This foolish concubine begs your highness to calm your anger. Li Liangyuan smiled and said, since you're foolish, you ought to study. The crown prince, who had always doted on her, followed her advice and confined Sui Sui in the library. You won't be allowed out until you've thoroughly mastered the 4 books and 5 classics. By the crown prince's decree, Sui Sui was sent to the library that very day. With heavy guards stationed outside the door, her father cursed Sui Sui as useless when he heard the news. All those years eating our Zhong family's food for nothing, utterly worthless. The beauties in the Eastern Palace all mocked Sui Sui. They placed bets on when Sui Sui would emerge. In the end, they all laughed at their gamble. That fool can't even recognize a single character. He'll never get out in this lifetime. Sui Sui remained composed, but my heart ached so much I shed tears. When I was alive, Sui Sui never lacked clothes or food. Now trapped in this vast library, she can't even eat her fill. At night, she wrapped herself in thin bedding, holding a book and reading it word by word with great care. The Crown Prince had hired a highly renowned tutor for Sui Sui. I know you've always been mischievous at the girls' school, but this is the Eastern Palace now. I'm not your mother who would indulge you, Grand Tutor. You have full authority to discipline her. In less than 2 months, Sui Sui's palms had developed calluses from being struck by the disciplinary ruler, yet her tutor had gone from the initial disgust upon first meeting her to a slight satisfaction now. It took her 2 years before she could finally leave the library pavilion. She had grown much thinner, her waist now slender enough to be encircled by a single hand, and her already striking features had become even more refined. After evaluating Sui Sui, the Crown Prince nodded approvingly, but Consort Li was consumed with jealousy and resentment, joining others in isolating and targeting Sui Sui. At first, Sui Sui trembled with anger, her emotions plain on her face, but eventually she learned to remain composed in the face of provocation. The Crown Prince went hunting in the eastern suburbs every day. To cater to his interests, Sui Sui prepared bows and arrows and practiced shooting in the courtyard. Passing by, Consort Li doubled over with laughter. Others shoot wild geese, but you're trying to laugh them to death. You can't even draw the bow properly. She forcefully snatched Sui Sui's bow and arrows, shooting down Sui Sui's hair bun. Fool, this is how you shoot an arrow. Did you see that clearly? Sui Sui pondered for a moment, casually tied her hair back into a bun, then trotted over to retrieve the long arrow and handed it to Li Liangyuan. Please demonstrate again, she said sternly, pointing at her own hair with utmost seriousness. Li Liangyuan angrily threw the arrow to the ground. You're insane. Sui Sui held her breath and practiced diligently using the same technique Li Liangyuan had employed against her, only to end up straining her wrist. The Crown Prince sighed helplessly. Sui Sui, what are you doing? Lowering her eyes, Sui Sui replied, Your Highness enjoys horseback archery. So I wish to learn. And why would you learn that? I want to stay by your Highness's side year after year. From then on, every afternoon, the Crown Prince would spend an hour teaching Sui Sui archery and horseback riding. Sui Sui fell off the horse countless times, so often that even the Crown Prince advised her to give up. Yet she gritted her teeth and climbed back on, covered in mud, stubbornly telling the Crown Prince, I wish to stay by your Highness's side year after year. Whatever pleases your Highness, I will learn. It wasn't until autumn of the following year that Sui Sui successfully hunted her first wild goose. The Crown Prince was overjoyed. He clapped his hands publicly and hosted a banquet in Sui Sui's honor. Sui Sui's calligraphy was meticulously modeled after the Crown Prince's own writing exercises. The Crown Prince choked back tears. Is my handwriting truly so hideous? Sui Sui sighed. It must be the brush's fault. The Crown Prince shared his own brush with her. She then added, it must be the paper's fault. The Crown Prince handed her his own sheet of rice paper. It must be, Sui Sui, she said with a smile. All right, it's the teacher's fault. Your Highness shall be Sui Sui's teacher instead. 2 years later, Sui Sui's handwriting had become indistinguishable from the Crown Prince's. The Emperor fell gravely ill, and the Crown Prince assumed regency in his stead. While reviewing memorials, Sui Sui stood by his side grinding ink. Considering your diligent service, I've promoted your elder brother to the Hanlin Academy. Sui Sui stopped her hands, kneeling on the ground and said, Your Highness, this is favoritism. I know my elder brother's capabilities all too well, and so do the court officials. These are difficult times, and your Highness should not act this way. Others will gossip about your Highness. The Crown Prince helped her up with a sigh, saying, You're so understanding, yet Consort Li repeatedly asks me to promote her younger brother. Sui Sui replied gently, Consort Li has given birth to His Majesty's first imperial grandson and is pregnant again. If your Highness indulges her, the court officials won't say anything. After all, imperial heirs are of utmost importance. I've favored you for so long, yet there's still no sign of pregnancy. Sui Sui cooed playfully. Perhaps my child wishes to be the firstborn after your Highness ascends the throne. The Crown Prince stroked her face, amused as if teasing a pet. He didn't know that after each night of intimacy, Sui Sui would secretly drink contraceptive medicine. Sui Sui's father fell ill and sent someone to summon her home. As soon as Sui Sui returned to the mansion, she was slapped by concubine Su. You wretch! How dare you obstruct your brother's promotion? My husband, Zhong Wei, looked at Sui Sui with disappointment. You've let me down so much. How could I have a daughter like you? concubine Su's son, Jong-yoon, said coldly, "Father, with her malicious heart, keeping her alive will surely ruin my career," Aunt Su said bitterly. "Yes, husband, we arranged her marriage into the Eastern Palace precisely to pave the way for Yuna, yet she's become nothing but a hindrance." Jong Wei asked Sui Sui with a darkened face, "Do you admit your fault?" Sui Sui lowered her eyes and replied, "I'll accept whatever punishment father decides, but truly, now is not the opportune time for brother's promotion. I acted for the family's benefit." Jong-yoon struck her again with another slap. "How dare you spout such nonsense? You did this deliberately." Sui Sui wiped the blood from her lips. "If elder brother insists on thinking so, I have nothing more to say." When Sui Sui was subjected to family discipline and lay on the brink of death, the crown prince himself came. Sui Sui's maid, Ruyue, wept bitterly at the crown prince's side. In fury, the prince snapped the ruler used to beat Sui Sui and glared fiercely at Jong Wei. The Jong family thought Sui Sui was out of favor, but they forgot that even as the crown prince's concubine, she was now a royal consort recorded in the Imperial Jade Register, not someone they could casually beat or berate. Jong Wei was terrified out of his wits. He scolded Aunt Su and Jong-yoon fiercely, forcing them to go to the Eastern Palace and apologize to Sui Sui. "That girl seems to have won the crown prince's favor now. We must be careful to win her over and avoid offending her." Playing humble and reading people's expressions were Aunt Su's specialties, but this time her skills were useless. The crown prince wouldn't let them see Sui Sui. Sui Sui ran a high fever continuously and remained unconscious for half a month before finally waking up. She asked Ruyue, "Has His Highness dealt with them?" Ruyue shook her head. "He just scolded them." Sui Sui's face instantly turned deathly pale. She dismissed everyone and lay expressionless on the bed, her eyes fixed unwaveringly in one direction, lost in thought. Upon hearing that Sui Sui had awakened, the crown prince suspended his official duties to visit her. "After all, he is your father. You mustn't speak disrespectfully to him anymore." Sui Sui smiled and asked, "Did father say that to your highness?" The crown prince caressed her face. "That's right, in the past, you were mischievous and showed no respect for elders because you were the daughter of a marquis's household, but from now on, you must never behave like that again. You are now my Liang Yuan, your every word and action represents me. You must no longer lack propriety and give others grounds for criticism. It will do you no good in the future." Sui Sui turned over, her back facing the crown prince. "My father struck me because I advised your highness against promoting my brother through nepotism. If your highness doubts me, you may ask the servants who were present at the time." The crown prince called Sui Sui twice, but she ignored him. With a flick of his sleeve, he stormed off. "Jong Sui Sui, I've spoiled you too much." Sui Sui's eyes were slightly reddened, yet she remained silent. The next day, the crown prince summoned Sui Sui to his study. "I've already investigated the matter from that day and reprimanded your father and brother." "Just a reprimand. What more do you want? They are your father and brother." "Sui Sui, you've been overstepping your bounds lately. This is Madame Jong, who has taught generations of crown princesses and empresses palace etiquette. From now on, she will instruct you." Sui Sui remained silent for a long moment, the light gradually fading from her eyes. She forced a smile. "Your highness prefers women who know their place. Sui Sui is willing to be such a woman," the crown prince said coldly. "See that you remember this." After leaving the study, Sui Sui walked away indifferently, her eyes carrying a faintly mocking smile. Ruyue asked worriedly what was wrong with her. Sui Sui smiled and said, "Just now, I figured something out." Ruyue asked anxiously, "What is it?" Sui Sui sighed. "So besides myself, there's truly no one in this world I can rely on. Then I shall stop counting on him." For several months in a row, Sui Sui studied etiquette under the palace matron's guidance. Being a woman, the matron could physically discipline her with far greater convenience than the previous male tutor. During those days, Sui Sui's body was always covered in bruises. The crown prince was overseeing state affairs in place of the emperor. His duties were numerous, and he was scarcely seen during the day. Only at night would he come to see Sui Sui, not frequently, but not rarely either. He picked up the ointment and personally applied it to Sui Sui's wounds. "You're so clumsy. After all this time, you're still getting punished by the matron." "My mother did everything perfectly back then. The matron never once raised a cane to her." His words made no sense at all. His mother was the eldest legitimate daughter of the duke's household. Even if she made a mistake in etiquette, how would the palace matrons dare lay a hand on her? "But my daughter, she was merely a gift my father sent to the Eastern Palace. To outsiders, she was nothing but a laughable plaything. How could there be even a shred of respect for her?" Sui Sui lowered her head, her voice choked with tears yet still forcing a smile. "It's Sui Sui who's too foolish. Sui Sui will study hard under the matron's guidance. The crown prince stiffened for a moment, wiping Suesue's tears dry as he coaxed, "Don't think these present days are unbearable." His dark eyes flickered, his tone softening. "Suesue, your good days lie ahead." A month later, Suesue had nearly mastered palace etiquette, and the crown prince summoned her daily to grind ink in his study every afternoon. After half a month of this routine, Suesue subtly reminded the prince one evening, "Although His Majesty is gravely ill, whether it's true or not remains uncertain, Your Highness should not rush to win over certain court officials. Simply focus on completing the tasks His Majesty has entrusted to you." The crown prince's face darkened with displeasure. "How dare you interfere in state affairs?" he snorted. "You're becoming increasingly lawless." Suesue knelt to beg forgiveness, but the crown prince left in anger, punishing her with confinement. For several days afterward, he stayed exclusively at Consort Li's quarters. Though the Eastern Palace harem couldn't compare to the imperial harem in numbers, it was still an arena where concubines curried favor with superiors and trampled on inferiors in their struggle for the prince's attention. Here, one could only secure their position either through the crown prince's favor or by relying on their powerful maternal family. But now, Suesue had neither. All that awaited her were leftovers and the scornful whispers of palace maids and eunuchs. Ryua held Suesue tightly, her heart aching as she wept. Suesue, however, seemed indifferent as she took out the hairpin gifted by the crown prince. "Pawn it," she said. Ryua protested. "But this was specially made for you by His Highness. It represents his affection and favor," Suesue said coldly. "So what? In my eyes, these are worth less than a full meal." Half a month later, the emperor recovered and summoned the crown prince, the eldest prince, and the third prince to the palace hall. The emperor threw all the memorials the crown prince had reviewed in his stead during those days right at his face, cursing him for his audacity. The crown prince was placed under house arrest, shocking the entire court. After receiving the delivered message, Suesue burned the letter paper and said to Ryua with a smile, "No need to embroider handkerchiefs anymore, I've won the bet. Ryua, you'll never have to go hungry with me again." The Eastern Palace was shrouded in gloom, eerily silent, except before the crown prince's study, where it was unusually lively. Li Liangyuan knelt on the ground wailing, abandoning all decorum befitting an imperial consort, her forehead striking against the square bricks of the courtyard until bloodstains mottled the surface. "Your Highness, I beg you to save my brother. The emperor intends to execute him. Our Li family has only this one son." Though the emperor resented how the crown prince had used his regency to secretly win over court officials and foster factions, he still harbored some pity for him. After all, the prince was born of his deceased wife who had passed away. During the crown prince's regency, Consort Li had repeatedly used their child to plead with him for promotions for her brother, promoted 2 ranks within a month. Both were lucrative positions, while he basked in self-praise. There were inevitably those who burned with envy yet had to offer flattery. Now that the crown prince had fallen from grace, he became the scapegoat to appease the emperor's wrath. His Majesty sentenced Li Liangyuan's brother to death by 1,000 cuts. Not only that, but he also ordered the crown prince to personally oversee the execution with Li Liangyuan in tow. Faced with Li Liangyuan's wailing, the crown prince could do nothing but irritably order her carried back and confined to her quarters. On the day of the execution, Consort Li turned pale and wept uncontrollably at the execution ground. When the executioner took his knife and carved the first piece of flesh from her brother's body, Consort Li let out a piercing scream and fainted. The shock was so severe that she miscarried the child in her womb. The crown prince stood devastated, shedding tears publicly. Finally recalling Suesue's earlier warnings to him, now filled with bitter regret, with no crown princess in the Eastern Palace and Consort Li gravely ill, Suesue held the highest rank among the consorts. Now favored by the crown prince's compassion, she temporarily assumed Consort Li's duties in managing the Eastern Palace's affairs. When the Eastern Palace's influence waned, the other princes seized this golden opportunity, banding together to bring the crown prince to his ruin. Memorials impeaching the crown prince piled up like snowflakes on the emperor's desk, prompting His Majesty to suspend court audiences for 3 consecutive days. The crown prince sank into despondency, drowning himself in wine day after day. Though his advisors sought daily audiences, he avoided them all. Only Suesue remained constantly by his side. Each day as the crown prince wallowed in drunken stupor, Suesue attended him faithfully. Practicing calligraphy by copying Buddhist scriptures in the prince's distinctive hand, Zhong Wei spoke to concubine Su and Zhong Yun in the mansion as if he had narrowly escaped death. Thankfully Suesue had foresight, otherwise it wouldn't just be Minister Li's son who died that was the only heir of the Li family. Zhong Yun broke out in a cold sweat and dared not speak, while concubine Su snorted coldly, At this point, you're still saying such things. The crown prince's current situation is like a grasshopper after autumn. Once he's deposed and another prince ascends the throne, will you, as the former crown prince's father-in-law, still have any standing left in court? After hearing this, Zhong Wei turned deathly pale and wiped his sweat. What on earth should we do now? He pointed angrily at concubine Su and said furiously, if you hadn't been blinded by greed back then, insisting on sending Sui Sui to the Eastern Palace to pave the way for Yuna, how could we have gotten involved in the struggle for succession? Now look at us, not only has Yuna lost all hope of promotion, but we've also been dragged into the crown prince's faction. Concubine Su sneered, why are you scolding me? You were the one who agreed to this in the first place. Now, if you want to distance yourself from the crown prince, it couldn't be easier. If Sui Sui dies mysteriously in the Eastern Palace, everyone will know the crown prince drove your daughter to her death. No matter who ascends the throne later, they'll believe there's bad blood between you and the crown prince over your daughter's death. Not only will they not blame you, but they'll also trust and promote you. Zhong Wei remained silent. Seeing his hesitation, concubine Su intensified her persuasion, with Zhongyun fanning the flames beside them. In the end, Zhong Wei nodded in agreement. The next day, Zhong Wei went to the Eastern Palace to see Sui Sui. Compared to her former capricious and arrogant demeanor at home, Sui Sui, having been tempered for 3 years in the Eastern Palace, had long shed her youthful recklessness, leaving only an air of calm indifference where joy and anger remained hidden. What brings you here today, father? Zhong Wei accepted the tea poured by Sui Sui, then took out a packet of arsenic from his sleeve and placed it before her. The crown prince's downfall is inevitable, and sooner or later, you'll be implicated and perish. Whether you die early or late, death is certain. Why not help the Zhong family sever ties with the Eastern Palace? Rest assured, after your death, I will take good care of your maternal grandfather's family. Sui Sui smiled and said, what if I refuse? Zhong Wei's face turned cold. You're alive now, relying on the crown prince's influence to protect your maternal grandfather's family. But if the crown prince falls and you die, even if my marquisate declines, forcing a powerless merchant family to their deaths would still be within my means. Sui Sui picked up the packet of arsenic, her smile laced with mockery. Father, you're truly a petty villain, and I happen to like petty villains. Let me offer father some advice as well. Drugging someone is too foolish. If I were to die, His Highness would surely investigate the cause of death thoroughly. Poison like arsenic requires buyers and sellers to register their names. Even if father obtained it through intermediaries, walls have ears. Can you guarantee that the person who gave you the poison won't later use your act of forcing your daughter to her death as leverage to make you their puppet? Sui Sui's words were calm and precise. Yet Zhong Wei broke out in a cold sweat. Sui Sui kept the packet of arsenic and said to Zhong Wei, father wants to sever ties with the Eastern Palace, making it appear to outsiders that you have no connection whatsoever with the crown prince. The most straightforward method is to impeach the crown prince like those others have done. Not only will this distance you from him, but people will also praise you for upholding justice by sacrificing family ties. Zhong Wei felt that compared to poisoning with arsenic, Sui Sui's suggestion was far more preferable. The moment his impeachment memorial against the crown prince was submitted, the entire court was thrown into an uproar. Discussions erupted both inside and outside the court, all centered on the crown prince's impending downfall. Now even the marquis's household, bound to him by marriage, was rushing to cut ties. These words naturally reached the Eastern Palace and the crown prince's ears immediately, yet he still paid them no heed. As if such words could no longer affect him, holding his wine, he drank himself into a stupor once more. Sui Sui, enduring the disdainful gazes of everyone in the Eastern Palace, went to the crown prince's chambers as usual. Only this time, the crown prince wasn't in his chambers, he was in the wine cellar. Sui Sui stood to the side, gazing with mixed emotions at the crown prince slumped on the ground, eyes shut as he drank incessantly. Just a few months ago, he had been the revered heir apparent of Shengjing, his brilliance so dazzling it commanded awe. Now, in mere days, his edge had been worn away. His fighting spirit utterly vanished. Sui Sui called his name, Chu Xian. She had always addressed him as Your Highness before. This was the first time she called him by his name. He didn't respond, only drank gloomily with darkened eyes, his lips already shadowed by stubble. This would have been unthinkable in the past. He had always cared deeply about his appearance. Sui Sui snatched the wine from his hand without expression, raised it high, and poured the liquor over his face. The crown prince tilted his head back and closed his eyes as the icy liquor trailed down his cheeks, soaking his collar. Sui Sui smashed the wine jug and shouted sharply, "What are you doing? Waiting to die?" Chu Xian wiped his face with his hand, opened his eyes, and shrugged indifferently. So what if I die? What's there to fear? Isn't Father Emperor after my life right now? He rose from the ground, his handsome yet disheveled face drawing close to Sui, and suddenly burst into laughter. Aren't you terrified of death, Sui? Rest assured, I won't let you die. I'll write you a letter of divorce right now. You can return to your Marquis estate. Whether I live or die won't drag you down. What a pity, what a shame. I went to such lengths to hire matrons to teach you the etiquette befitting a future empress. Alas, I can't make you empress after all. Once you're free of me, live well. Before his words had fully faded, Sui's slap sent his face reeling sideways, leaving him wide-eyed and stunned. Having lived this long, even his own father the emperor had never struck him. Chu Xian, do you think you're being particularly devoted and particularly wronged? You've engaged in courting court officials. From the moment you took the position of crown prince, you ceased to be alone. From the day you coveted my beauty and demanded my father send me to the Eastern Palace, my fate had already been rewritten by you. This isn't something that can just be dropped because you say you don't want it anymore, you don't want to do it anymore, you don't want to live anymore. It doesn't matter if you die. But what about the officials who supported you? Won't the other princes suppress them when they ascend the throne? At best, they'll lose their lives. At worst, their entire clans will be executed. What will become of them? Your dismissal of me might protect me. But gossip is terrifying. Who would dare take the crown prince's discarded concubine? How could I possibly stand firm in this world? Chu Xian, how could I have married such a coward? Sui drew the sharp sword from the crown prince's waist. Since you no longer wish to live, rather than waiting for his majesty to decree your death, I might as well kill you now and then take my own life. Let's die together. Better that than watching you drown your sorrows in drink day after day. It's pathetic. The cold glint of the long sword pierced Chu Xian's eyes. He reached out and grasped the blade, blood sliding down from his palm and staining the steel. His hoarse voice, accompanied by eyes gradually regaining their clarity, echoed through the dim wine cellar. This prince is no coward. Sui dropped her sword and threw herself into his arms, weeping uncontrollably. Your Highness, Sui isn't afraid of death. Sui is willing to live and die with you. But Sui refuses to cling to life ignobly. Even in death, we should fight with all our might and die without regrets. The crown prince held Sui tightly. Together in life, together in death, with you by my side. What have I to fear? He hadn't noticed that Sui's eyes had long been devoid of tears, leaving only indifference. She had already learned how to control a man, not through blind submission and flattery, nor through threats of power, but by becoming a community of shared interests with him. He might stop loving you, but he'll always need you, yet you could abandon him at any moment. After dressing the crown prince's wounds, Sui presented 100 copies of Buddhist scriptures transcribed in imitation of his handwriting. The crown prince asked, "What is this for?" Sui replied, "Does your highness know why, despite the countless memorials impeaching you flooding the court these days, His Majesty has been suppressing them without taking action? He's even stopped holding court sessions altogether to prevent ministers from impeaching you during audiences." The crown prince fell silent, his lips twisting into a bitter smile. Perhaps he's waiting for the right moment to depose me in one fell swoop. Sui shook her head. No, 7 days from now marks the late empress's birthday. The crown prince was thunderstruck, unconsciously lowering his gaze. I warned you long ago, Your Highness, that you shouldn't act too hastily. The emperor deeply loved the late empress, and you're his only child with her. Unless you rebel or commit treason, His Majesty wouldn't move against you. The crown prince remained silent, his eyes filled with grief and regret. Sui continued, "My father has already impeached you at court." After his departure, more memorials accusing you piled up on His Majesty's desk. The crown prince sneered. "Everyone hits a man when he's down." Sui murmured thoughtfully, "Your Highness, do you know what they say about things turning into their opposites when they reach extremes?" The crown prince met her gaze, and the two shared a knowing smile. He tightened his grip on Sui's hand, his eyes shining brilliantly. All unspoken words dissolved into a single kiss. The political winds at court shifted completely overnight. Ministers who had previously supported the crown prince's faction suddenly defected to other princes, submitting memorials to impeach him. Even something as trivial as the crown prince taking too long to eat could be twisted into grounds for questioning his suitability as heir. The contents of the impeachment memorials grew increasingly absurd. On the very day of the late empress's birthday, the crown prince took Sui with him to pay respects, only to be ambushed along the way, blood staining the prayer flags. The emperor, who had been waiting at the late empress's tomb, grew furious when the crown prince failed to arrive on time, angrily denouncing him as unfilial. Upon hearing that the crown prince had been assassinated on his way, His Majesty flew into a rage, kicked open the palanquin, mounted his horse in haste, and galloped over anxiously. The captain of the guards was scared out of his wits. By the time His Majesty arrived, Sui Sui was holding the barely alive crown prince and weeping. Seeing His Majesty approach, Sui Sui hurriedly knelt and kowtowed. "Your Majesty, please save the crown prince. This is not the first assassination attempt." Sui Sui pried open the crown prince's sword wound that had scabbed over, weeping as she said, "Long before this, assassins had already broken into the Eastern Palace and wounded His Highness. But we never imagined they would dare to openly ambush and kill the crown prince." The transcribed Buddhist scriptures lay scattered across the ground, stained with the prince's blood. The emperor, his eyes reddened, picked up the scriptures as tears fell. My son, my son." Sui Sui's tears flowed endlessly. His Highness knew he could not escape death. These past days and nights, he never slept. Transcribing 100 volumes of Buddhist scriptures to offer before the late Empress's spirit tablet on her birthday, his final act of filial piety for her, His Majesty said sorrowfully, "How could I want his life? He is my eldest son, the only legitimate heir born to me and the late Empress." The imperial physician rushed over, stopping the crown prince's bleeding and bandaging his wounds before the prince slowly regained consciousness, pale-faced. He struggled to rise and kowtow to His Majesty, who stopped him. "What are you doing? Your wounds have just been dressed." The crown prince coughed weakly and said, "This unfilial son knows death is inevitable. I only beg your Majesty to grant me an intact corpse and bury me beside Her Majesty the Empress, so I may accompany her day and night." His Majesty angrily slapped him, but the next moment, father and son embraced each other, weeping bitterly. The accompanying historian recorded this day. During the sacrificial journey to Mount Yang, the crown prince was assassinated and hovered between life and death. The emperor wept in grief, and father and son cried in each other's arms, reconciling as before. After the emperor's return to the capital, he bestowed countless rewards upon the Eastern Palace. Every day, His Majesty dispatched imperial physicians to attend to the crown prince. Even though his injuries had stabilized, memorials impeaching the crown prince received no response. The emperor infected several princes residing in the capital as kings and ordered them to depart immediately for their respective fiefdoms. This completely dashed their hopes of contending for the crown prince's position. The political situation at court shifted once again. His Majesty found my father's memorial among the pile of petitions, reprimanded him severely, and ordered him to reflect on his mistakes behind closed doors. Though my father's impeachment of the crown prince was indeed righteous justice against his own kin, regardless of whether the prince had fallen out of His Majesty's favor, he remained the son His Majesty had painstakingly nurtured for years. With my father setting the example, more voices gradually rose in the court speaking in favor of the crown prince. For a time, the Eastern Palace became bustling with visitors, while the crown prince was recuperating. The duty of receiving guests fell entirely to Sui Sui. Though I had taught Sui Sui some etiquette back home, she remained somewhat unpracticed in these matters. She personally went to invite Consort Li, who had secluded herself since losing her son, ever since witnessing her younger brother's death. Consort Li seemed to have lost all vitality. When she saw Sui Sui again, none of her former radiant sharpness, the kind she once used to compete for favor, remained. Sui Sui took the crown prince's token and personally went to the academy to bring back her eldest son. "Go see your mother," she said. Lady Li burst into tears upon seeing her son. After her son returned to the academy, Lady Li began applying makeup to go out. Sui Sui invited her to jointly receive the arriving guests, and she showed no affectation. Working together, they meticulously recorded the gift list, stored all presents uniformly in the treasury, sealed them properly, and submitted the list to His Majesty. Half a month later, when the crown prince had mostly recovered from his injuries, the Eastern Palace hosted a banquet to express gratitude to the officials who had sent gifts and visited during His Highness's illness. During this period, Zhong Wei sent the most gifts, many of which were actually the dowry I had originally prepared for Sui Sui. Before Sui Sui married into the Eastern Palace, Zhong Wei and concubine Su withheld her dowry, intending to use it as betrothal gifts for Zhong Yun. After Zhong Wei impeached the crown prince and was reprimanded by His Majesty for being unrighteous and dishonorable, the family originally betrothed to Zhong Yun, fearing involvement, hastily called off the engagement overnight. Worried that the Zhong family wouldn't let the matter rest, the other party not only returned the betrothal gifts but also added many more items. They were right, the Zhong family wouldn't let it go. Especially Madame Su, who came cursing at their door, insults like snobbish, looking down on others, and all sorts of filthy words poured out endlessly. Not only did the two families fail to become in-laws, They became outright enemies. As a result, Zhong Yun's betrothal gifts were freed up and entirely repurposed to mend relations with the Eastern Palace. When Zhong Wei received the invitation from the Eastern Palace, he nearly wept with joy. It's finally paying off. Sui Sui does care about her father after all, he said to concubine Su. You don't get along with Sui Sui, and besides, you're the one who caused her mother's death. You'd better stay home so we don't ruin everything. Concubine Su immediately grew frantic, pounding his chest in tears. You heartless man, how can you say such things? What do you mean I caused her mother's death? Before long, Sui Sui's maid Ryue came to relay a message. Lady Liang Yuan says Madam must also attend. If Sui Sui had forbidden concubine Su from going, concubine Su would have at most cursed her a few times. Su Auntie would be too frightened to accept Sui Sui's proactive invitation. Su Auntie initially wanted to feign illness, but Zhong Wei, unwilling to displease the crown prince and Sui Sui again, insisted she attend. Zhong Wei never expected Sui Sui to arrange his seat closest to the crown prince. Overjoyed, he watched as those who had avoided him after his reprimand by the emperor now rushed to flatter him. Seeing he had regained the crown prince's favor, Aunt Su was full of vigilance, not even daring to touch the pastries or tea on the table. As the banquet began, the meticulously trained songstresses eagerly took turns performing. Amidst the merriment of wine and warmth, the atmosphere gradually grew livelier. At that very moment, the songstresses withdrew in an orderly manner, while Sui Sui, clad in white robes and wielding a long sword, performed a sword dance accompanied by the crown prince himself playing the zither. The sound of wind splitting filled the air as Sui Sui wielded a flexible sword wrapped in red silk, dancing with unstoppable force, piercing Madame Su's wine cup and slicing off strands of her hair. Madame Su was terrified, her hairpin disheveled, her face deathly pale as she screamed for help. Sui Sui smiled brightly, coquettishly turning toward the crown prince. Your Highness, my stepmother is such a coward, no fun at all. With helpless resignation, the crown prince chided. Sui Sui, mind your manners. He turned his head and said to my father with a mocking smile, father-in-law's new wife is truly too timid. Does Sui Sui look like she'd commit murder in the Eastern Palace? Why is she so frightened? Zhong Wei broke out in cold sweat, shooting Su Auntie a resentful glare before clasping his hands in apology to His Highness. My wife's timidity has spoiled your Highness's mood. I beg your Highness's forgiveness. Throughout the entire banquet until its conclusion, neither the crown prince nor Sui Sui cast another glance at Zhong Wei or concubine Su. Zhong Wei, unwilling to accept defeat, proposed a toast to the crown prince, who merely responded with mutual congratulations without drinking. The officials present kept their eyes downcast, well aware that His Highness was displeased because of concubine Su. After the banquet ended, a colleague friendly with Zhong Wei said to him, others, even after their wives pass away, remarry daughters from respectable families as their second wives. But you went and promoted a concubine to be your wife. Small gatherings might be forgiven, but at such grand occasions, aren't you just humiliating yourself? Zhong Wei was filled with regret. As soon as he boarded the carriage, concubine Su, disheveled and weeping, began accusing Sui Sui of harboring hatred toward her, claiming she would kill her sooner or later. Recalling his colleague's earlier words, Zhong Wei replied with disgust, if you hadn't dodged, how could Sui Sui's sword have pierced your wine cup and severed your hair? In the end, it's your own lack of composure that brought this embarrassment upon yourself. Aunt Su couldn't believe it and started crying, making a scene with him inside the carriage. The sound of their argument spilled out, heard by many people outside. When Ryue told Sui Sui about the incident, Sui Sui was brewing medicine for the crown prince. Hearing this, she smiled and said, let the dogs bite each other, they don't have many days left to live anyway. His Majesty fell seriously ill, and Sui Sui went with the crown prince to attend to him year after year. Most of the time, Sui Sui and the Empress took care of His Majesty together, as the affairs of the court were numerous and required constant attention. Seizing a moment when no one was around, the Empress warned Sui Sui, I heard that the Crown Prince has arranged for the palace who teaches the Crown Princess's royal etiquette to instruct you. Sui Sui did not miss the hint of murderous intent in the Empress's eyes. His Highness did indeed ask her to instruct me, she replied. I am well aware of my lowly status and have never dared to aspire to the position of Crown Princess. Moreover, His Highness has long been fond of Miss Song. She is the most suitable candidate for Crown Princess. Miss Song was the niece of the Empress and also her most favored candidate for Crown Princess. Such glib talk, how can this palace trust you? Sui Sui knelt on the ground and said, this concubine will deliver a result that satisfies your Highness and will never become an obstacle on Miss Song's path to becoming Crown Princess. Before her next visit to the palace to attend to the empress's illness, Sui Sui retrieved the arsenic from the very bottom of her dressing case, the same poison Zhong Wei had once demanded she used to end her own life. She knelt before His Majesty and tearfully declared, "Your Majesty, this humble concubine must report my own father. He conspired with the third prince who harbors rebellious intentions to stage a coup. This is the arsenic he brought to the Eastern Palace and ordered me to use to poison His Highness the Crown Prince." Enraged, His Majesty ordered the imperial physician to verify the substance. When it was confirmed to be arsenic, Sui Sui was immediately taken into custody. The chief minister of the Dali Temple was personally tasked with investigating the matter. It was discovered that Zhong Wei, seeking self-preservation, had sent gifts to several princes. Upon learning of the third prince's fondness for beauties, he went so far as to spend heavily to procure delicate courtesans from Yangju and present them to the third prince's residence. Though done covertly, it wasn't hard to uncover. The source of the arsenic was traced through purchase records from 80 pharmacies across the city, ultimately pointing to a servant belonging to Su Concubine's younger brother. With all evidence gathered, the Zhong family was imprisoned. Attempted murder of a royal prince warranted punishment extending to 9 generations of kin. When the crown prince came to visit Sui Sui, she knelt before him, pleading for mercy on her maternal family. The crown prince looked at her with disappointment. "Is this truly all you ask of me?" Year after year, she kowtowed and replied, "Yes." The crown prince slammed the table in fury, his eyes reddening. "Zhong Sui, don't you have anything to say to me?" Sui Sui pressed her forehead to the ground, avoiding speech. Naturally, the crown prince didn't believe Zhong Wei would dare rebel. This entire affair had been meticulously orchestrated by Sui Sui herself, who had personally entered the game as a pawn. The crown prince sat down in despair, his gaze filled with anguish. "Zhong Sui, why didn't you tell me? Don't you know your father is in trouble, and you'll never become empress in this lifetime?" Sui Sui smiled helplessly. "I never wanted to be empress. Is your mother's grudge the only thing in your eyes? Then what about me, Zhong Sui? What about me? While I was planning for our future, what were you doing? Don't you realize you've ruined everything? You might even die." Sui Sui gazed at him calmly. "I know, the worst outcome is nothing but death. I only beg your highness to protect my maternal grandfather's family. I would be eternally grateful." The crown prince, watching Sui Sui kowtow until her forehead bled, was overcome with fury and roared, "Enough! His Majesty is a wise ruler. Your report merits reward. He would never exterminate 9 generations of the Zhong family, nor will you die, but you shall never become empress, Zhong Sui. It was you who refused, not I who withheld." The crown prince stormed off in anger, and shortly after, the matron from the empress's side emerged from another direction, handing Sui Sui a dose of medicine. After the execution of Zhong Wei's entire family, Sui Sui took the medicine given by the empress's matron, vomited blood, and died. Her body was discarded in a mass burial ground. By the time the crown prince rushed there like a madman, Ryue had already buried Sui Sui. The crown prince gripped Ryue's neck fiercely, screaming, "Who told you to bury her? Who gave you the right?" He murmured to himself, "How could she be buried here? She can't be buried here. How could she die?" His sobs choked him as he frantically dug at the earth on Sui Sui's grave, only to be stopped by the arriving empress. "Haven't you gone mad enough? The daughter of a disgraced official deserves no place in the imperial tomb." Ryue knelt weeping and pleaded, "Your Highness, Our Lady's last words were begging you to let her go. She only wished to be buried beside her mother. She wanted to go nowhere else." The crown prince clenched his fists and struck Sui Sui's tombstone, his knuckles blooded, his voice trembling with grief. "Zhong Sui, how cruel you are." Shortly after the crown prince ascended the throne, Ryue left the palace and returned to her hometown. On her way home, she diverted her journey to Jiangling. By the riverside of Jiangling, a newly opened tavern appeared. Ryue rushed forward, calling out, "Miss." Sui Sui, with her large belly, was chopping firewood with an axe. Spotting Ryue, she exclaimed joyfully, "You've finally come." Kisaragi wiped her tears and said, "This servant calculated the time and realized the young mistress would soon give birth, so I hurried over." 7 days later, Sui Sui gave birth to a daughter. Upon hearing the news, the Empress Dowager, now the Empress, was overjoyed and immediately sent her attendants with lavish gifts. That fake death medicine had been given by the Empress when she diagnosed Sui Sui's pregnancy, though she favored her own niece. After generations of imperial heirs dwindling, nothing mattered more than securing the royal lineage. Sui Sui named her child Ping'an, peace. By the time Ping'an turned 7, she was exactly like Sui Sui, completely illiterate. When told to study, the child would instead roam the mountains and fields with the wooden sword Sui Sui had made for her strapped to her back. at the foot of the mountain, she met a man who bore a striking resemblance to her. The moment he saw her, his eyes instantly reddened. "Little girl, what's your name? Where's your father?" Ping'an defensively pointed her broken sword at him. "My name is Ping'an. My mother said my father was lustful, had many wives, and died of syphilis." Chu Xian couldn't help but laugh. He mended Ping'an's broken sword and gently told her, "Your mother was right, your father wasn't good. In the future, you must treat your mother well." Ping'an nodded. "Of course, my mother only has me. If I don't treat her well, who will?" "Hey, uncle, are you even capable? Your hands are so clumsy, my mother could fix it perfectly in no time." "Yes, your mother is quite skilled with her hands." The end.